Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you one and all for attending today. Mr. Ferrell, question for you. About how much money and manpower has the state of Wyoming put into on-the-ground conservation and wildlife management?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman Lummis. Well, just annually, for example, the Game and Fish's budget's about $60 million a year. All of that's essentially going towards conservation. The Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resources Trust Fund has put a tremendous amount of money in just sage-grouse alone. In the last 3 years, I think the number is over $100 million between matched money by private sector, the state of Wyoming, and, for example, the Natural Resource Conservation Service's Sage-Grouse Initiative. So we're talking numbers that we've never seen before in my profession being committed by a state to a single species.
And how much money roughly is in the Wyoming Wildlife and Natural Resources Trust Fund?
Oh,
I'll get that from you later.
I could get that for you later.
Okay. What about other stewardship conservation groups and volunteer organizations? Do they add anything to the effort?
Absolutely.
Let me ask you about some of those, if I could, sort of yes or no. Does the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation do on-the-ground conservation?
Absolutely.
And do they help you in your capacity as Wyoming's Endangered Species Act coordinator with on-the-ground recovery?
They do. They're primarily focused on elk, but they're looking at landscape scale projects that help endangered species as well.
What about the Conservation Fund?
They do as well. They help fund some of those conservation easements that I've spoken about regarding sage-grouse.
What about the Wyoming Stock Growers Land Trust?
Very, very active in conservation, also in the sage-grouse arena.
Do you know if the Montana Land Alliance, the Colorado Cattlemen's Ag Land Trust, the California Rangeland Trust participate in conserving species along with ecosystem efforts?
I'm not familiar with what those groups are doing.
Okay, what about the Center for Biological Diversity? Has it done actual conservation work on the ground in our state?
Not to my knowledge.
What about the Natural Resources Defense Fund, the NRDC?
Again, not to my knowledge.
How about Wild Earth Guardians?
Same.
No on-the-ground conservation work?
Not that I know of.
In our state. Do you know if they've done, did they do any in Arizona, when you were in Arizona?
No.
I have a question about grizzly bears. Was the grizzly bear at one time, first of all, is it listed as an endangered species?
It's listed as threatened.
Threatened. At one time, was it considered recovered under the initial breeding pair per land area recovery criteria?
It was delisted in 2007 and put back on the list through litigation in 2008.
And was it under a different set of criteria? Why, when it was recovered under initial criteria, was it subsequently put back on a lesser level of listing, but nevertheless a listing level?
The downlisting from endangered to threatened, I believe, happened a long, long time ago. I couldn't comment on that. You mentioned 7 suggestions that you had for this committee in your testimony. You also discussed 2 of them, litigation and climate change modeling, as you went into some detail on those. Could you give us a couple more examples that you'd like to highlight of those 7 suggestions in your testimony? I'd be happy to. One of the things is this definition of significant portion of the range. It's a kind of a technical analysis, but what had happened in 2011, there were 2 court decisions primarily that said you can't delist on administrative boundaries anymore. The frustration with that is administrative boundaries is where regulatory mechanisms come from. That is the source of a regulatory mechanism, and yet regulatory mechanisms are often cited, including those cases, as what's being inadequate, causing the relisting of a delisted species. But
Aside from that, the current draft definition of SPR doesn't allow one to use some of the tools that are most important to us in conserving threatened species, those being 10J designations and 4D rules.
So 10J, my time has expired. I'd like to, if we go into a second round, I'd like to explore non-essential experimental populations.
Or we'll
Thank
get a
you.
written answer to those remarks.